All right, welcome everyone to the Sherwood City Council Work Session, September 17, 2024 at 5:35. Got 3 items on the agenda tonight. We have a solid waste annual report. Should be an exciting conversation. We have Bruce is here tonight to talk about economic development incentives and Sherwood West update. We're gonna deal with the technical issue real quick here.
Turn the speaker off.
All right, technical issue solved. All right, so with that, Craig, do you want to lead us into this?
Yeah, so we have Chris Bell with Bell and Associates. We have Kristen and Eric from Pride Disposal. They're here to answer any questions after we go through the presentations or during the presentations. I just want to let the council know that Pride did have their annual report due. I think it was due on March 15th and they were ahead of schedule. It's just taking us this long to actually get on the council work session because we didn't have a meeting in August and we had full plates the other meeting. So I'll turn it over to Chris and please ask questions if you have them.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Members of council, I appreciate the opportunity to come today to talk about garbage. City of Sherwood.
You should have hit something.
If you click on it and just do page down, you can do that.
Oh, there you go. So one of the questions was that was presented and thank you for, I sent the initial presentation out and I think I've got 3 rounds of questions regarding, okay, add this and so I welcome the opportunity because it gives you guys some insight to what we're doing. But the way your ordinance reads that when the report is submitted by Pride, there's 1 of 2 things that can happen. If the rate, the reported rate is within the range, then it's there's a portion of the CPI that's added to adjust the rates. And if the rates, or excuse me, the rate of return submitted by Pride is above or below that rate range, then the city does a rate review. And for the last few years, we have done a rate review. And it's not necessarily because of what Pride has been submitting. It's been because we've had significant rate increases for disposal, which are significant. There's been a lot of other changes too regarding not only the cost of disposal, but also the cost of processing and the cost of everything else that seems to be happening within the realm of garbage. But the way you're rating, the way your ordinance says is written, it's for a 10% rate of return for the calendar year. So when I initially calculated the rates, I submitted them. And this is kind of a process. I send it to Craig, I send it to Eric and Kristen so they can review, because again, whatever we calculate is going to impact their business. So I want their input and it came back and we adjusted. But right now, what we're presenting to the city council is an estimated rate of return at 10% for costs that are going to be incurred in 2025, since this rate will go into effect in January 1st, 2025. So these are the adjusted rate of return or results, the overall composite. And you can see that car residential was just a little under 3%. 4.3% for container, and Dropbox was 7.7%. So the overall adjusted for 2023 was 4%. And so that kicked off that because it was below the 8% rate range, even for a rate review. So the current rates that are in effect right now went into effect last September 2023. And if you recall, we met earlier, we said because the increase that for the disposal was so significant, rather than waiting till January 1st, we adjusted or proposed a rate increase effective September 2023, which is outside your normal calendar schedule for rate adjustments. And these were the increases at that time, 5.7% for residential, and that includes weekly garbage, weekly organic collection, and every other week recycling. Commercial rates include garbage and recycling. So if you get garbage, you get recycling. I don't know if any businesses don't get recycling. That's a good question for Eric and Kristen. And then Dropbox rates increased by 3.3% per home. And so, and the way Dropbox rates are set, it's $155 to haul, and then plus the pass-through disposal. So depending on what's in that box determines how much you're going to be charged for disposal. And as I was saying, the rate of return rate report that was submitted in March was for 2023, and we're September 2024, and these rates are going to be 2025. So to escalate those rates for 2024 and 2025, we looked at the sequential increase for the union contract, which is 5.9%. Trucking repair has gone up by about 2.5%, not as high as it used to be because it's probably got a lot of new trucks in. However, there's still an increase that's being incurred or being experienced by Pride, as well as every other garbage hauler within the area. Organic waste is going to increase by 8.5%. Again, that's a combination of two rate increases for nature's needs, which since you do have food in your yard debris, it's taken up nature's needs where they can process that material. Administrative costs, I estimate 3% for, these are the people that answer the phones, people who submit your reports, all that. And then truck depreciation increased by 13%. And this is one of the big increases. And this is not an uncommon occurrence right now because post 2020 with COVID, the cost of garbage trucks has significantly increased. And the lag time has significantly increased. It used to be about a year, maybe a year and a half at the most to get a new truck. Now it's anywhere from 18 months to 24 months and even beyond. And the average cost on these trucks is significantly higher. For example, the automated trucks that Pride has got in $437,000. They're all CNG, right? All CNG. And so that's a little bit higher but then again, you do get the benefit on the back end because CNG is significantly lower.
What's CNG?
Compressed natural gas.
Okay.
So can you give me an idea of, obviously, when you buy a new asset, what's the depreciation schedule? 7 years?
7 years.
And we should have stuff rolling off depreciation?
Yes, we did. We did. Yeah, we did have that. In fact, I'll show you that because and it wasn't a lot too, because these trucks, I think were 2021, 22. I think you're getting some stuff in from 2024.
This is 3 years worth of trucks that all showed up at once. So we tried to get 2 automated trucks a year was kind of the schedule we were on, and we placed the order and it got pushed. We ordered 2 more, got pushed, ordered 2 more, and then they finally all showed up at once.
Here we are.
Yeah.
And I guess, do you have an idea? Like, I understand that these line items are increasing by that much, but how much, is there a later slide that talks about how that impacts rates?
Right here. So the question then becomes, here's what was added. And we're looking at the overall cost of the truck and then the monthly cost of that depreciation. It's an 84-month, 7-year life on those trucks. And then we had, there was 3 trucks of that where it came off. And then you've got a glass truck, a front load truck, and a side loader. And then the way the cost, the allocation of cost works in this area is we look at truck hours. And so, for example, of all the truck hours accumulated by Pride, only 15% are utilized within the city. Other portions, other trucks are arriving in the county, in Hillsborough, in King County, in Tigard. Where else? Beaverton, that's right, Beaverton, I've heard. So 15% of the overall depreciation for those trucks is being allocated to the city of Sherwood. Again, it's based on accumulated truck hours over the course of the year. So you can see what I did here is took, what the total company operations were for the vehicles. The city Sherwood allocation, then 265,000, and then the additional amount went from 265 to 277. So the next big increase, and this is kind of an area of concern for a lot of people, is over the last 7 years, the cost of garbage disposal has gone from $95 a ton to $156 a ton at Metro. And Price also had similar increases over that same period of time. So you can see this progressing increase. One of the things that you're probably going to hear this a couple of years ago, Metro was looking at that increase, and they were comparing their dollar amount, their tonnage fee, comparing to Seattle, comparing to San Francisco, and say, look, we're still well below the market component. And I got a problem with that because you can go down to Salem. What Salem's number is 87.45 a ton. They got a garbage burner, at least for a couple more months. But you can also compare that to, let's say, Clark County, Washington, and Clark County, Washington probably, I think, has as many tons through their facility as Metro has through their 2 facilities. And the rate of disposal in Clark County is very reasonable compared to Metro. And you can see there's 2 primary components. There's the cost of transfer and disposal, and that's the cost to put the garbage on the facility, scoop it up, put it in a truck, and take it to a distant landfill. And then there's the Metro fees and taxes. And right now we're $49.30 a ton for Metro fees and taxes.
So the facility that we send our garbage to, landfill, is that a Metro facility or?
No, it's Pride.
It's your own facility. Because on the transfer and disposal, we're exactly matching. Metro, and Metro's sending it out to Boardman and Arlington. So I'm just trying to understand why that's, it's, and this year it's to the penny. So I'm just trying to understand the 2 costs.
Well, there's 2
programs can't be.
The interesting thing is Metro wants you to match their number. But at the same time, they don't want you to match their number. And so part of it, correct me if I'm wrong, the allocation of tons that you guys get is depending on matching their tonnage, their dollar amount.
Yeah, so Metro allocates the wet waste tons in the region, and how that is done is they have a minimum amount that they must receive at their 2 facilities, which is a total of 40% of the region's tons. And then they take the remaining 60% and divvy it up amongst the private facilities, of which there are 6. And there's a portion of that 60% that we all get as a base tonnage. And then in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, they've done goal-based tonnage allocation for the remainder. So in order for us to reach that maximum percentage that we're eligible for, which is 10% of the region's tons, we have to meet each of those goals. And if we fall short on any of those goals, we don't get that portion of that 10% of tons. So one of the goals that we have to that we have to meet to get maximum tonnage allocation is to not exceed Metro's tip fee. So we have to be at or below their tip fee for wet waste. And so that is why it is 2 penny. And the last several years, as Metro has been subsidizing their costs with their reserves that we don't have access to, there's been a pressure between the private facilities and Metro as to, you expect us to match your rate, but 1, we don't have the economies of scale because you have 40% of the region's tons and we have 10%. So there's a different math problem there in terms of how we can spread those costs across fewer tons, as well as the reserves that they had previously been building on a combination of their fees and taxes and their operational reserves and blending those. So that what is now $49.30 a ton was being put into the same, some of those, if they collected more than they anticipated if they needed in the year in their budget, then those were going into blended reserves and they were using that money to subsidize their rate, but we did not have access to that money to subsidize our rate. And so that is part of why the industry has been pushing Metro to get to true cost of service, because we felt that our rate was being held artificially low in order to meet the tonnage allocation piece that we had to. That is a very short summary of like a 3-year conversation, so.
Makes a lot of sense, though. I mean.
So that implies though that Metro's cheaper?
I think Metro has,
I just gotta ask.
Yeah.
Metro, if you have a fixed cost of building and a piece of machinery and you can spread that across 40% of the region's tons and not 10%, then your per ton cost is going to be cheaper for certain aspects of your fixed cost, yes.
Something stinks about that.
Well, this goes way back because they set those percentages so they could pay off gold bonds. And then when the gold bonds went away, they
Then they
never got
put
rid
it
of the
in
percentages. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last time I looked, it was 43%, they got 43%.
They don't allocate a small percentage because they base the allocation on forecasting, and that is not a science, and so they leave a little bit of wiggle room, but we are capped, so even if their forecast is short 50,000 tons, those tons can only go to a Metro facility, not to a private facility.
But I think just before you gave your explanation, I thought what was being said was that the metro fees have been going up quite a bit. And what I'm just hearing you say is, well, they're not going up as much as they should be going up for some reason.
There's two components, I'll show you this is.
If I could add just one more thing on that. Part of what makes the last few years of increases look more significant is that in 2020, Metro made a policy decision not to raise their tonnage fee because of the pandemic. And they knew that if they raised their tonnage fee, it would have an impact on rates and everybody was struggling to pay their bills. But again, they dipped into their reserves to cover that, which we don't have access to, and we were forced to match their rate at a subsidized cost that we did not have the same subsidy provided to us, and so they've been playing catch up for the last few years to make up for part of that, which is part of why the last couple of years have seen larger increases, because they skipped a year of increase in that.
I understand what you're saying, but I would argue that their catch up also has included massive expansion of staff and programs. I mean, you have 7 people just to do public outreach and they're.
There should be
Garbage.
there should be
Just
zero.
garbage.
There's no reason to do. public
Yeah, so-
Well, and I should say, when I'm talking about the needed increase, I'm talking about the transfer and disposal component. I think in that regional system fee, the Metro excise tax fees, though that is where I think it, to your point, Mr. Mayor, is about where there is room for improvement, more transparency, more clarity about how many people and programs are needed. And that's the $49 a ton that I believe generates about $34 million. So it's not insignificant.
So can you go back to the previous slide? So in the transfer and disposal, is there any Metro fees in that line?
Right?
No, that's all the operating costs.
That's solely your operating costs.
There, I've got one a little bit further down here. Yeah, this is the question that we raised. Roger, what is that? What are the components of the disposal costs? So I took the residential increase. Broke out into two, but you can see the disposal costs. Recology has a contract with Metro to operate the transfer stations, and that's almost $36 a ton, which is a significant amount. Then you have Metro's transfer station operations people. Those are the people who are supporting the transfer station. Then you got the trucking contract, you got the fuel contract. The one comparable that they have on the fuel that Pride doesn't have is they don't have to pay state taxes on the fuel. The $21.20 is a lower disposal fee than Pride has to pay, because that's based at 400,000+ tons at Waste Management. And then you've got the piece of the regional system fee, the excise tax, and
What do you say disposal costs? Is that?
that's the disposal at Arlington.
The per ton fee.
Per ton.
Oh, that's the per ton.
Yes.
fee.
Yeah. So, and this is Metro's, this is not Pride Trader.
So the $31.72 per ton is what Metro collects to pay for their waste prevention and environmental services budget for the non-operational components. So the recycling outreach staff, they have about, Metro has about 200 people in the WPS department. And then the excise tax portion, the 1469, that goes into their general fund.
The enhancements, that dollar that's supposed to come out to Sherwood.
The
Through
CEP.
their community grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
DEQ gets $1.89.
Okay, and are any of those negotiable, or are those all?
That's Metro's, yeah, that's Metro's one.
Right, I know, but could we say, hey, we don't wanna do organics anymore or something, does that?
I'm waiting for one of these cities to say, we want out of the way shed. I'm waiting for one of you guys. to
Just
say
like, does
that.
that have to go through Metro? Can you guys be your own thing? Never mind.
That's
It's a bigger question than just the garbage.
Sorry, go ahead.
like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
The recology is all of the mixed.
That is just the contract to operate both transfer stations. And it's it's a significant, it's a very onerous contract. It's got a lot more expensive since Recology took over operations at the transfer station compared to Republic Services.
So Metro hires a private company to run their transfer
Yeah.
stations for them.
Yeah, it's,
I don't think this slide is the gist of what we're here to discuss, and we're on.
Yeah, we're
on time, so.
so the other question too on this right here, your collection cost, and I can't remember which council member wanted. But I wanted to see the breakout of that $2.22, what that was covering, so that's what this is. Portion of labor, truck. Organics, the administrative cost, the franchise fee, and then the margin. And the margin, if you recall, that was 4%, so there's that additional 6% plus the increased cost.
So.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
before we, no, that's okay, you can go, before we jump into the, we were talking before the meeting. And the rates in the surrounding areas are significantly lower, in Clark County, Yamhill County.
Oh, yeah.
So is anyone looking at why it's so different in the metro region? I mean, just anecdotally, I can go, I can dump truck at South in Newburgh
Mhm.
for like $27.
Yeah.
If I go to anything in the metro area, it's close to $100.
There's a couple things. Number one, every metro or regulates to some degree what the collection services are. So if you as a city council came back and said, we want every other week yard debris, then there's a process to go through to get that approved by Metro. I mean, you could just say, we're gonna do it. And some cities have done it, and in Metro, there's a standard, now run it through DEQ. So there's standards of collection that all the cities have to abide by. You've got your disposal. The other thing too, that we, like I said, there's a labor cost, and every garbage company that's operating here is under the Teamster contract. And that's been significantly increasing. I think right now, it's 33 or 34 an hour. 33 an hour, yeah, 33, and it's gonna go up too. So there's those Recology paying. They're actually under the class right now. They're renegotiating right now on there.
Are we asking at the transfer station?
Yeah,
So that is also one of the goal-based metrics for tonnage allocation. It has to do with a minimum level for wages for the transfer station employees and benefits. So Recology has to meet those same standards that the private facilities have to meet at a minimum. But that is one of the goal-based tonnage pieces as well. Has to do with living wage and benefits.
I'm all for a living
Yeah,
wage,
yeah, I was just-
but seems.
When you guys try to people that, yeah, 2 jobs, yeah. So these are the proposed collection rates for residential and for commercial. You can see that there's a collection aspect of it, there's a disposal piece of it. And especially on the commercial, that disposal is significant. As far as the increases.
So is under the collection column and the disposal column, is that your proposed increase amount?
Yeah, well, where it says proposed, and collections, what comprises the total proposed amount, so that's the additional collection costs, that increase that are gonna be incurred, and then it's the disposal cost, so if you add those two together, that's the proposed. You can see.
So yeah, okay,
222 and 71,
yeah, that's what we're proposing to add.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't like this chart in that if the people from home are looking at this, that's not what they pay.
So
They're paying It's because they're getting the cart plus the recycling plus the yard debris, so that's the bill that people are, what's that?
So the bill comes out, it bills 2 months at a time.
Most customers are both.
Yeah. So that rate, that's the $32.99 for 35-gallon cart. When that bill comes out, it's for 2 months of $32.99. And it's got the dates on the invoice showing what months those are for, and so every other month.
Well, that's what most
the
people like to
customers
see
pay
anyways.
For that.
And it shows the other services on the bill as well, and it shows them as included,
Those
so
are
it's not,
included,
it's
yeah.
not a separate charge for
Yeah.
those.
And one of the standards or one of the changes that we're making in Washington County is a standard medical collection rate for all the jurisdictions. And you can see that some of the costs have increased and some of the costs have decreased.
Who's we?
All the there's one.
So, I mean, we haven't been asked that
Okay.
question, so we're not necessarily on board with that
Yeah.
yet. So you're saying we,
So who's pushing it?
You have one medical collection company, it's Trilogy.
Where is that?
But is Washington County pushing this or is it Metro pushing this?
No, it's a combination of Hillsborough, Beaverton, Tigard, and now Sherwood.
Well,
Do we
That's why
offer
we're
the
both-
service now?
What's that?
Okay, so we offer the service now.
Yes.
But
but we have, that's the first I've heard of it. We haven't.
We've never talked about
that or talked about it. So,
Medical collection rates?
well, we may be doing it now, but
Yes.
to increase it or change it,
Yes.
that has not been a conversation.
Okay. This right here is the proposed changes or the proposed changes to current collection rates for medical collection. And again, this is kind of a looking to make everything standardized throughout the Washington County area. And
Why?
because you have, well, number one, it's,
Is the goal, volume creates lower costs?
yes. Well, you can see right here too, you can see that there is been a decrease, because prior to that, it was, here's the rate for a stop plus a unit rate for the boxes collected. And
So Mayor, part of what it is, and so medical rates kind of, they fall within that same idea of looking to get in that target range, that 8 to 12, targeted, 10. And so the way the rates are currently structured in some of the different sizes, the disposal cost component was subsidizing the cost of the on-site pickup. So in the end, it was still getting to that same rate of return. The whole purpose of doing it this way is to get the disposal to more line up with what the actual disposal piece is, and to get the on-site pickup charge more in line with what that actual cost is. And so it's more of a, where does that number need to show up? So that it all comes together, makes more sense in total. And it's something that's been proposed in each of the jurisdictions. It's not really an economy of scale sort of thing. It's more still getting to that same end result.
Like you're paying a true cost of service.
Exactly. Getting the cost where it's
Person A
supposed
subsidizing person B because the mix of.
Yeah.
So
Pick up
if
is
the
different.
number is the same, where's, because if I add up the middle column, that's an increase, so where's the offset?
And you gotta get into the number of customers and the size of each container, and then start.
How many containers per pickup?
Yeah.
so if you're 10 or more, then you see that unit cost per container drop down. So for example, you got a 31, if you're calling for the pickup, the on-site pickup, right now it's $38.20. And if they've got 100 31-gallon containers, they're gonna take $30.90 multiplied by 100. In this case, with the new rates, they take, the first 9 would be $32.87, and then the next 91 would be $21.89 per unit.
Are these like the Providence and medical offices, that not home stuff,
Correct.
dental clinic?
This is not home stuff. This is-
Yeah.
So, okay, well, so we're.
I'm less worried about that.
So can we go back to the?
Yeah.
Because I think we're gonna have to have another session.
Yeah.
And, because we have 2 other big topics we need to talk about tonight. Okay, and what I'd like to propose to council is this, for this next session, I would like Metro here. I'd like to get some of their key staff members and our Metro counselor in the room.
Executive work session.
I want to do work session and so we can ask questions and really understand all these components, because my opinion is Metro just keeps adding costs. And it's impacting our rates. So I think we need to talk to
I mean, when we were on that one slide where it showed, the excise tax, and that goes to the general fund, what is that funding? Out of garbage fees, what is that funding in the general fund?
These are questions I would ask, and for context for me, I was on, they had a rate setting policy committee that was meant to help Metro redefine their rate setting. And part of the recommendation that came out was having a committee made up of local representation from each jurisdiction that would review expenses and costs and make recommendations on rate and go to a cost of service model. This last cycle, Metro cherry picked the cost of service recommendation out and said, we are just going to raise our tipping fees to match that with no discussion on what are we buying, why is staff increasing and stuff like that. And I think I'm not the only mayor in Washington County that's having a bit of a challenge with this right now.
I
I think we need to have a conversation with them.
Making sure-
Let's, we'll be real, this is the goose that feeds the beast.
I was gonna say, making sure garbage isn't paying for all other Metro.
It is.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a problem.
this is getting a little in the weeds of fund accounting, but they transferred all the communication specialists to the garbage fund or WPES. And then they charged, then they added a $20 million charge back to general services. So there's all kinds of weird things going on that still have yet to get good answers out of Metro and how the budgets are managed, and it directly impacts what we see.
Yeah, except garbage funds their world. When they decide how much funds they want, then they turn around and back into it and go rate.
Yeah. Would you guys be willing to come back to that too? Awesome. Are you, everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I'd also like to have an asterisk next to the things that, are, hey, these are optional, right? We can have a discussion as to whether or not we want those services, right?
Every other week,
Yeah.
every year. or something.
And again, because if we can't afford something,
Way against that one. Well, you could have it every week during the summer and then once a month in the winter.
That is problematic for staffing.
Well, we can talk about
but,
it.
but that's just it. It's like, I don't know what the movable levers are, right?
Because we had that conversation about 2 years ago about all the
But
movable
let's-
levers.
No, I know, but I wasn't here for that, but what I'm worried about is it sounds like it's just like, hey, you have to do this and you have to shut up and take it. I understand, but that's the thing, is that, are there any of those things that are asterisk?
What our options are.
Yeah.
I agree with
Get out
you.
of the kitchen, get rid of the kitchen waste.
Yeah, so is everybody okay? We'll just have another work session, we'll get scheduled.
Sure.
Better make that an hour long one.
We'll do an hour, yeah.
And we'll have time before the first of the year when these go into effect.
You need 30 days to get the notices out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll get something either October or November. Sooner, October, I think would be best.
I mean, obviously, as me as a counselor, we always support Pride. So our questions are about Metro, not about Pride.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys know that.
Well, and I think it's important that Metro counselors and staff are here because they can make these changes. We're the ones that are accountable to our community for it, so they need to be here and talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Who's your Metro Council member?
Rose Collins.
All right,
Mayor, I think we tried to answer everybody's question that sent something back. But one question, Counselor Stankey, I think did not get answered. So could try to answer the capital reserve fund to rebuild the transfer station question.
Yeah, I think the big answer in terms of how we do those things is we do them as needed and not, all at one time. So, 25 years ago, we expanded our office when we needed to be able to house more customer service staff. About 5 years, expanding the transfer station. And we did that partially with some grant funding from Metro because we're trying to, always trying to look at other opportunities to help fund those things. But we finance them and fund them on an as needed basis. If we were to have, a catastrophic battery fire, which PSA, please keep your batteries out of your garbage and recycling.
Amen.
Then, we have insurance to cover those things. But that is also where we've seen a significant increase in the last few years is the cost of our insurance because of the higher risk of fires in our trucks at our facilities. And so, it is getting harder to even find a carrier that will cover our industry, and the ones that do are charging exorbitant amounts. So I feel like we are covered to do things as we need, do things in case of catastrophe. But if there's any follow-ups, to it, I'm happy.
Right, if anyone else has additional questions, just give them a Craig, we can send them and we can answer. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Bernard.
Thanks.
Your co-pilot can take you home now. Sure, this is thrilling meetings. Your dad is talking about garbage so much.
Sebastian. In the middle.
Bruce.
She's driving.
Well, hi, how are you all?
And I hate to do this too, but I want to make sure we have time to cover with West and we have.
Yeah. I think I'll make it shorter and I won't go over it. You have a report,
Yeah.
you know, so
No,
let's see. We need PowerPoint.
And then it's one of those three.
Advanced.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna need some help. Maybe you can help me advance it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it. Shares. We didn't have all the kids show up, but I guess concerned.
Okay, we ready?
Yeah.
Let's go to the. Shall I get started? Oh, no, you're.
On the video screen, a little minus button in the upper left. Things go small. Perfect.
Look for there, go ahead, Bruce, you're ready.
Okay, so I appreciate having the opportunity to talk about target industries and particularly traded sector target industries, as well as incentives, potential incentives. And I think let's go to the next slide. This all occurred on the May 7th council work session that we had on the development code audit on promoting stronger economic development. And you expressed an interest in target industries that are paying higher wage jobs or could pay higher wage jobs in the community and really the types of incentives that could spur that on. And I think you mentioned some examples. I heard SDC waivers, which I think are really the URA paying the city, backfilling the city. Then you also mentioned the Wilsonville Invest Now program. I can talk about that. Fast track targeting target industries. And I'm not going to really get into too much on the development code update myself. But just before we go into that, I want to mention on small businesses, because I know I've heard from members of the council that you're interested in incentives for small businesses, because the traded sector companies are generally the larger, medium-sized and larger companies. That's going to be covered. I think the earliest discussion on that could be next meeting, where you're going to talk about the Old Town plan. And that could extend, of course, beyond the Old Town itself. So let's, all of this goes back to various council goals that you've established recently, including improving the development code, identifying target industries that can realistically, and I think that's an important word, offer a diversified economy for Sherwood, doing some data work on what industries in this region can pay a higher than median income, and then bringing jobs that allow people to work and live in Sherwood. So I think that's the basis for all really the staff work. So I started off by trying to figure out what are the target industries that could make sense for the city and refining them. And that really started with looking at the regional target industries with GPI and going back to the work of the CEDS, which was the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy that Metro and GPI did, I think it was in 2022. And then I basically worked with GPI to try to identify what are the higher paying industries, and they gave me a number of 84,000 from their statistics that was the average wage for all industries in Sherwood, and I had to use something as a basis. So then I looked at the NAICS codes, which is a federal standard for describing types of industries. I looked at the locational quotient, which I'll go over in a second, but those are the industries that are competitive within the region. If they're higher than 1.0, they have a competitive advantage in the region, like semiconductors might be 4. If they're less than that, they're not something for this region. So that tells me what could be reasonably attractive, because that was part of what you stated in the goal. So these are the industries that I came up with that look to be the industries that pay higher wages based on reviewing the NAICS codes against location quotients without getting into too much detail on that. So we can go to the next slide. So there are some challenges in attracting some of those industries now. We didn't seem to have that challenge before during COVID. We were getting companies like NSI and DW Fritz and some of those companies, Lamb Research, but that was with a very low interest rate environment. And I think what we've sort of seen is that we're now starting to see more distribution coming into some of our facilities. Not saying that's lower paying, I'm just saying that's what we're getting instead of some of the advanced manufacturing companies. And so I've been asking the CRE, the industrial real estate community, what does this mean? What I'm hearing pretty regularly is that there's some significant cost challenges in moving advanced manufacturing companies. They have big equipment, they have very heavy tenant improvement requirements that they need. And so they're basically deciding not to do that. They're staying in place in their outmoded facilities, basically somewhere in the inner region of Portland. And they're not relocating as much to the more efficient, larger spaces that we're developing. That doesn't mean that's going to continue, but that's kind of a trend that we're starting to see. And in fact, most of the industry that's come to Sherwood has been, in fact, companies that are growing within the region and no place to grow except outside the region if we didn't have the space here, generally speaking. And these industries that are staying put, they're unfortunately called the Oregon option. That's not a very good thing, frankly. That apparently is a commonly used term. So what I'm hearing from the industry is that there's a need for gap financing. So maybe we can talk about some of that gap financing. I'm trying to keep this really short because you have a report on this. So did some research in terms of what are some of the incentives that are available within this region. Essentially, the state of Oregon and the communities in Oregon, this is not a rich area in terms of incentives. It isn't North Carolina, it's not Texas, it's not Arizona or Nevada. So recognizing that we don't have a large toolkit here, I tried to see in some of the metro cities that I had time to look into what kind of incentives we're seeing for traded sector industries. So in the local incentives, we're seeing financial incentives in some cities. We're seeing non-financial incentives. I'm going to go over those really quickly because I think we're really tight on time. And then there's the state of Oregon, which I want to talk about. So the local economic development financial incentives, they're primarily local property tax abatements. That's pretty much what we're seeing as the major tool. For example, the state enterprise zones, they're called state enterprise zones, but they're locally established and they're abatements of the local property tax. That's really what we're talking about as that kind of incentive.
Credit for us giving up money?
Well, they approve it. Yes, they have to approve it. And the way they approve it in part is you have to meet certain criteria. So you have to have distress in the community. And I don't think I have time to really go through what that distress is, but it's higher unemployment and that kind of thing. So I looked at some of the programs, Gresham, Hillsborough. I mainly looked at Gresham. And Gresham has a program where they're abating it, and that is their #1 economic development incentive tool where they are abating property tax. And then you'd also.
Question.
Yes.
So, like if you look at the average, look at my property tax bill, like 15% actually goes to the city, the rest is going to that's first state school, all kinds of other things. Is that abatement across the board?
I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question. That was something I was trying to figure out, but I know it's the city's property tax, but I don't know if it applies to other taxing agencies or
If I was
not.
one of them, I want to be able to approve that.
Right, exactly.
And we talked about enterprise zones, I don't know, years ago, and it's not something Sherwood, I thought is that not something we would even qualify.
That's something I didn't know if I had time to mention. We don't easily qualify. We don't easily qualify, but we asked Art Fish, who's the head of enterprise zones for the state, if there's any areas of Sherwood that might benefit. There may be a few small block areas in Sherwood that could qualify, but we're generally running out of industrial land in the city pretty quickly. And so I think that's a factor to recognize.
You have a whole city in the 80s, yeah.
So I think it is a challenge for Sherwood, no doubt about it. And if it's something you want to pursue, then that's going to be a fairly large project that should be a goal.
We should always keep in mind, these interest rates are cyclical.
Well,
Right now they're high,
that's the other thing.
probably go down.
That's the other thing, right. And so I think we got to go back one. I'm sorry. There's some other programs out there, strategic investment zone. I don't know that we have time. By the way, enterprise zones are up to 7 years abatement. Strategic investment zones are up to 15 years abatement. Then Wilsonville Invest Now, that really simply, that's a program where they create individual parcels in their redevelopment. Sorry, that's another state, urban renewal area. And they'll take a single parcel, work with a single company, and they'll create a new urban renewal area going through the entire urban renewal plan adoption process. then they will provide an incentive to that company, which is an abatement of property taxes for a period of time. So if there's an interest in doing that, I would recommend that we bring on a firm that does urban renewal work like this, as we've done in 2021, doing our urban renewal plan, because it's the same process we'd have to go through. But that's just a really simple explanation of that. And of course, the question is really the fiscal impact on the URA. So I think we can keep going.
You're doing great. Don't feel
This is going fast enough? Okay.
URA is interesting, but from my perspective, what is the cost upfront to create a single lot URA? And then they still pay all their property taxes, but they turn around and they'll pay for improvements on the property.
There's definitely going to be a cost. Now, I didn't get into that level of detail, but
There's some magnitude of scale that really, there's still a 1 acre deal isn't gonna cut it.
they haven't used it much in Wilsonville. I understand for a bioscience company recruitment, they've used that program.
But a 50-acre deal, the TIF financing on that you could bond against, I think that's where you're.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So I'll keep going. You talked about URA or waivers, quote unquote waivers of the SDCs funded presumably by the URA. So I looked at Fairview. I didn't find many places that were doing this. I could always look more, but Fairview URA has a program where it's target industries, and they will provide some kind of an incentive for target industries by reducing or deferring the SDCs. In Gresham, they tried to create a program where the city was going to defer the SDC payments, and they were going to defer it for, without looking at my notes, I can't remember. They were going to defer it for a period of time, but because it was a city deferral, it was becoming a loan to a business. So they wanted to take a first lien position. They had a lot of interest in the program. The banks who were also investing in these companies said, no, the city is not taking first lien. You can be third lien or whatever it's going to be. So nobody's taking advantage of that program. And it's pretty risky if you're not in a first lien position, of course.
The other thing about that is it's funded by the URA, which means that property would also need to be in the URA.
Well,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it would have to be in the URA itself. So yeah, exactly. So, and of course, SDCs are tied to specific projects that are important projects to the city. So we wanted to just kind of make that point available. So there's various non-financial local incentives to be considered. And really, some of these are really the most important because really time is money. Okay. Yes.
So this is a question for Eric. As we're looking at Sherwood, it's gonna be about 200 acres of industrial land. Have we done the math on how much more we could add to URA or set up a single URA and still fall under the limits?
I think it's all about getting broadband built out and then taking those three.
Well, I think there's that, but if you add.
Well, just from a percentage standpoint, doing it right out of the gate.
You're adding
Yeah.
land mass.
You might be able to get it all in as it is.
That's right.
But we're really close to the 25% limit right now. I mean, what is it, 24.98 or something?
Yeah, but if you add 2 square miles.
25% of what we're adding.
But it's important to know that it's not, the boundary isn't the boundary of your growth boundary. It's the boundary of what's in the city. So if you're phasing.
I'm thinking down the road.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point. Annex first.
So I was saying, fast track permitting is really what we're talking about, expedited permitting. And of course, the city already has this red carpet team that we use for the larger projects, I think pretty regularly. But there are some interesting examples out there, such as Gresham's 66-day commitment to, this is industrial land use application, where they can get it done in 66 days. Now, that means that assumes staff approval of a lot of things, because that's the only way you're going to make 66 days in essence. Then Gresham has a rapid response team where one member of the economic development staff follows a project from the very beginning, is an advocate, and helps with planning and whatever, every step of the process until they get a C of O. So, some of this is certainly going to be applicable to Sherwood, but the reality is, Gresham's a bigger city, has more resources. And so in certain cases, developers may need to fund fast track permitting, which I think needs a fee schedule amendment of some kind, and there may be some need for some city financial sources to support that. I'll keep going.
Is 66 significantly faster?
It's quite a bit faster. It's usually 120 days as a requirement under state law. So and they market that pretty heavily as a key program that they have.
I'm just interested, because we get a lot of kudos from the companies we work with on our current red carpet process, right? For the record, there's no red carpet, it's just the process. But I'm just wondering, since we're already doing that, how much more does that help? I don't know.
It's working great, right now. I mean, it's been very successful.
Well, I mean, the reality is, a lot of brokers and developer and businesses have told me they like this idea of the 66 days.
Okay.
The reality is it's a marketing thing. It does, every day is interest lost. So it does, whether that's going to attract more to Gresham or not, I don't know. And if we had something similar to that at 70 days, whether that would help us, that make you.
I'm assuming that's for property that's already in the city limits and.
Oh, yeah. This is an application comes in, it's a pre-application, it goes through the process immediately. So there's some interpretation that goes into that 66 days.
Yeah,
quite
and it
frankly.
feels like we have enough asterisks or whatever on it. It is mostly a marketing thing, right?
Yeah.
Everything has to be 100% go your way. Well, not all.
I mean, we get updates offline on projects that are going through. And, you thought everything was good to go on day one. Oops, it's not complete. Oops, it's still not complete. Oops, it's still really not complete.
So that gets us to the last type of financial incentive that I'm aware of, and that's the state, Business Oregon. And the state is really Business Oregon is really a financing agency, if you will. And so there's the Governor's Strategic Reserve Fund, which is very discretionary. It requires intense review, and then the governor personally approves an application. Then there's the Business Development Fund. These are all for traded sector, but that can be used as a loans for land, building, machinery that goes to companies. That's a good program.
Moving machinery?
We never got into that. That's something that is intriguing to me. We had a meeting with a particular large developer that I put together, large developer in this community I put together with Business Oregon, and we talked about the issue that they were facing, that they couldn't bring manufacturing here as readily. And this was the program that was suggested by the Business Oregon staff. I think it depends on how you apply, in essence, but I think those things need to be factored into it.
It solves the interest rate problem.
It could, because it's a set rate. I've forgotten the amount without looking at my notes, but it's a set rate and it's low interest financing. I think it's probably in some ways a better program than SBA. There's some similarities to SBA here. Then there's credit enhancement, but the reality is there could be a real benefit for Sherwood. So maybe we can get into the recommendations next. So we're hoping you provide us with some direction on the target industries that we're proposing for Sherwood, that we think are the ones, we believe are the ones that could get to higher paying jobs, and that we listed earlier in the slides. Our recommendation to staff is that, so we don't have an impact on the current city URA or the Sherwood URA budget, that we consider the local non-financial incentive programs to expedite projects as appropriate and as you want to discuss. And that, and these would be for the traded sector industries, and that would be seen as a first step in maybe looking broader. And then continue to very proactively pursue Business Oregon, letting developers, which we're already doing, developers and companies know about Business Oregon, arranging meetings with Business Oregon where they're interested in having that, but using that as the primary financing incentive mechanism. So that, that's my quick presentation.
Finding that people are turning down Sherwood because we don't have any incentives, or people don't come in because you don't have anything to offer?
I will tell you that I know of one company that is a rapidly growing clean tech company that asked me, this goes back about a year now, whether Sherwood had an enterprise zone or whether we had an opportunity zone, which is a federal tax treasury thing. And I had to say no. And they said, well, we're going to go to Tualatin. I told them that I'm pretty much aware that Tualatin doesn't have an enterprise zone. So, I mean, they were shopping around, companies shop around. We do have a company we're talking to now that came to us from Business Oregon and Greater Portland Inc. that is asking for an incentive. So we don't get it a lot. All of the companies that come to Sherwood so far have not requested incentives, other than they want assistance in the permitting process, and they're getting assistance in the permitting process. I can say that a very large semiconductor company that's already in town, without naming anyone, has told us that Sherwood is kind of a model for how we work with them to get them into a manufacturing space ahead of time, in essence. And so do we need an incentive program? Well, it's desirable to have incentive programs that you can offer as a toolkit, but we haven't gotten many requests for that in the past.
Yeah, and I'm more interested, just like mom and pop's able to compete against, the Walmarts, we may not be able to do it on price, but we can do it on white glove service. And so some of these non-incentive financial ones, I'd be more in favor of, and and then as we look at, the specific industries, I'm always one for the tech and the clean tech in particular, but we could probably have I don't know, should we send around a list of the top three, everybody, or
Well,
what?
I guess, I mean, I have no idea in terms of quality family jobs. I'm not an expert in that. I would rely on staff to tell us who the best ones are.
Didn't they say that all of those are about equal, the ones on that?
Well, the ones that I had on the slide, they're all
They're all at or above.
all at or above
Yeah.
what is the average in Sherwood, jobs in Sherwood. And that's why I put them on
Okay.
that list. And I left flexibility, because what's other advanced manufacturing? It leaves some flexibility for a decision to be made in,
Yeah.
if that company meets it in some manner.
Yeah, what I'm interested in on all of these though is not just we got one guy who's shipping stuff out of a warehouse, right? This is a company that is, has people, right?
Yeah,
Has
right.
a bunch of people in it,
Yeah, right.
so.
I love your recommendations. I support them all. I think that's the right approach to take. I don't think we need to get heavy into incentives until we start hearing, we lost this business to this town
Yeah.
because they had an incentive and we didn't. Okay, if that happens, let's talk. But until that starts happening, I think what we're doing, and I think focusing on service is the right approach.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, I had a question. Is there a greater need for moving the machinery or rebuilding the facilities?
Well, what I've heard is that negotiations have gone on between a developer, for example, and an advanced manufacturing company. And those negotiations went on for a long time and they fell through. We didn't know about that because of NDAs and what have you. They fell through. And because if I'd known, we would have tried to take them to Business Oregon to see if there was a program for that. But they did, and they did because I'm told of heavy tenant improvements requirements on that a landlord would have to do, and also the very expensive involvement of moving this really heavy manufacturing equipment. That's what I was told. So I think those are key issues, and neither the company was willing to pay nor the landlord was willing to pay. And so therefore there was no deal. There was a need for some kind of gap financing. That might well have been Business Oregon financing if I had heard about it sooner.
I think that's part of the solution for that is talking to these developers and saying, contact us, please. I'd go to help.
Right, exactly.
And currently, more distribution is going in than we were maybe hoping for.
Well, I hope always for 100% advanced manufacturing, but that is living in a dream.
Fair enough.
Right? Okay. And I get it, that distribution is part of industrial, it's part of the manufacturing process. If you don't have distribution, you probably won't get, in a facility, you're not gonna probably be able to get the manufacturing. I mean, NSI is a good example. There's manufacturing, there's R&D, there's engineering, and there's distribution. And so that's all part of an industry, but yeah, we're getting a certain number of distribution companies. At the same time, companies that are moving in are helping the URA increment, because the buildings are getting filled. It means that new businesses can get new phase 2 and phase 3 will get built faster. So
But we're also getting companies that are in that trading sector.
yeah, they are getting companies. And I mean, you could look at a large semiconductor. Oh, talk about Lam. You could say Lam. Lam is advanced manufacturing, and they're 50,000 square feet. But that 270,000 square feet is part of an advanced manufacturing company. That's their logistics, their Portland Regional Logistics they're putting in place. That all supports, a company like Lamb Research. It all kind of fits together. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it.
Right, it's all, one's across the street from the other.
It's our little cluster, or the beginning of a cluster.
Awesome. So are you okay with the suggestion?
Yeah, it seems like that's a good plan. I haven't.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I am as well. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Hopefully this isn't the last time we present to council.
It may be, but I'll be here October 1st because we have the Old Town.
Oh, that's right.
Old Town Fund, which I'm very invested in.
Still got another shot at.
Right, I think it'll be another team maybe.
All right.
We'll ask
Thank
you
you.
questions all the same.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, you're,
And I'm gonna invite Sean or money manager up to the table as well.
welcome, Sean.
Don't,
Thank you.
yeah, don't close that.
Don't close that, okay? Oh.
Close that X on the left for all tools. Okay.
Share it first.
To the left, right, almost down.
X.
Where's the actual?
Parallel the tools, all tools.
Close that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go on. Full screen. Where's the full screen?
It's good.
Full screen. All right. All right, talking about Sherwood West tonight, talked about Sherwood West at the last work session, so we'll give you an update and really the purpose of the work session is to go over the resolution that you guys are gonna see tonight on new business, answer any questions, but also if you have any questions on Sherwood West generally outside of Metro. All of you know this, so I apologize preaching to the choir, but Sherwood West is a complete community. We have employment land, commercial, mixed use, we have a hospitality zone that's gonna be more of a destination. We have an industrial zone that's gonna cater to the traded sector, a lot of the target industries we just talked about. Of course, we have housing land, public institutional, that's mainly schools, parks and open space. And of course, Sherwood West is, will have about 340 acres net of land for needed housing. So the way the concept plan is put together responds to the Sherwood community needs, but also accounts for the regional needs as well. I think everyone knows this, we're the only UGB expansion this cycle. The next cycle is going to be 2030. So the next time Metro would consider on their regular legislative cycle is 6 years from now, 2030. So we're the only one on the table during this 2024 cycle. We talked a lot last work session about the housing estimates and really have worked to, clarify those even further. And this is how we're sort of presenting it to all the different Metro bodies, Metro Council, et cetera. So the Sherwood West housing estimates, the zone density range is 6.3 to 9.2, which we discussed last time. The overall residential density is 9.2 units per net acre. And again, we assume that's because we assumed that developers would max out that base zone 6.3 to 9.2. We assumed that they would be able to hit that high number. And I think that's proving to be really good planning. Actually, there's been, other recent House Senate bills, Senate Bill 1537 that was passed this year in 2024 that allows for additional density that we didn't anticipate or know of when we adopted this concept.
Well, could I add to that? Because, you're gonna have right away in parks, there's all kinds of things that go into that density number. So if a developer hits 8, which is probably really good, we're at 9.2 because we know there's density bonuses with HB 2001. Where like a developer could come in instead of a single family detached at their discretion, put in a duplex. So kind of all of that's built in. Or an ADU. Yep. And all the conversations until recently haven't even talked about potential mixed use. So we want to plan, so that's kind of what full build out looks like. And for context for the community, we're at 7 to 8 right now. So it's not a huge shift in overall.
We're one of the densest communities in the metro region.
We are, but that doesn't mean.
I know.
would hate, but we're not.
But on average, because there's so many large lots in Portland.
Yes.
And Beaverton.
Yep.
And Hillsborough.
Yep.
And Lake Oswego.
Yep. absolutely right.
That's true. I wouldn't, I just don't want people to think about what's going on in Roy Rogers and think that's what. So, but I agree with you. But that 9.2 is inclusive of what we think a developer is gonna get to, plus those density bonuses that.
We have no idea what the ultimate build out will be because of all these other programs.
Or programs to come.
Yes, and so I think what, in my opinion, what we've done is plan for, plan for housing that meets the needs of the community, in a reasonable time frame. And I think we all understand that given the way that the state laws are going, given the way that the market trends are going, that's likely going to be pushed higher, as development occurs. I mean, this is a 40-year plan, so it may land at 9.2, depending on how things are in 20 to 30 years from now. I mean, that's a long time. So we'll see where they get there. But I think we put together a plan that really responds to the input that we receive from the community. And, over the next few decades is going to be compatible with Sherwood city limits as you go across the highway. So at that 9.2 target, that's 3,117 units total. It's 43% middle and multifamily units. The percentage of that 3,100 approximately is 43% middle and multifamily. Then as we mentioned, additional density for HB 2001 and SB 1537.
I want to say this for the benefit of the community. What we're not doing is what some of our neighbors are doing. Like I just had a conversation, like River Terrace 2 along Roy Rogers, they're planning for 20. It's great. That expansion. We are not doing that.
And I think just, I've done a lot of research, going back to the concept plan and all the public testimony that we received and all of the CAC and TAC meetings. And it was pretty clear, that Sherwood West, that the vision for Sherwood West was to, be integrated with the current city limits and the design and the character of current city limits. And I think that plan I think that our plan proposes that. So at the last meeting, we got discussed about how to move forward with the Metro COO recommendation and potential conditions of approval. Talked about that COO recommendation, alluding to potential higher density through conditions of approval. And so the direction was first to continue to negotiate conditions aligned with our community and our adopted concept plan. That work has continued and will continue through the end of this process. I'll have a timeline slide at the end here. The second option was to revise the Sherwood West concept plan. I'll have a slide on that. We'll have a resolution coming to you on October 1st. And then the third option, if it was absolutely necessary, is to withdraw the Sherwood West concept plan. And that's because we were able to put that together the quickest without a whole bunch of extra work. That's why it's coming to you right now instead of the revised one, which will come on October 1st.
So all of these really should say negotiate conditions of the UGB ask, revise the UGB ask, or withdraw the UGB ask. We're not withdrawing the concept plan, we're withdrawing the ask for the UGB expansion.
Yes. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah.
Just to clarify, so the COO recommendations that have come out will go to Metro Council. And then they'll discuss it and they'll approve whatever they want to approve. They'll approve it with conditions. And if it's approved with conditions, at that point, we still have the opportunity to say, no, we don't agree with those conditions, and then we can pull.
Yes.
Like, we don't have to make this decision prior to Metro making their decision.
I think this, to give you the full picture now, I think we probably should have put this in. So we're at the Blue, we're at September 17th tonight. Tomorrow, so there's going to be a process with advisory committees and then it's going to get to the Metro Council, but tomorrow's intact. I'll be there providing testimony. September 19th is core, I'll be there as well. And then September 25th is impact, which Mayor Rosner sits on. September 26th is going to be a big night. That's actually a public hearing where they're going to accept testimony at the Metro Council. So I do expect a lot of turnout from that in support and in opposition. I think we need to be prepared for a lot of testimony that night. Based on that input that they get that night, plus everything else they've seen, October 8th is going to be the big day for the Metro Council to give direction to Metro staff. And so what they're going to do, as far as I understand at that meeting, they will give direction to Metro staff about how to prepare the ordinance for the UGB expansion, or not. It could be no UGB expansion. But that is the day, it's a daytime meeting where they will provide the direction to Metro staff. Based on what we've been hearing, you know, it should be clear, based on that work session where this is going. And so what Sherwood staff is recommending is October 9th, basically the next day, is when, you know, you would make that decision whether or not to pull, withdraw, et cetera.
And you would be prepared after that, because it could change at a moment's notice.
It would be hard, it would be hard for them to switch gears quickly though, because the Metro staff is gonna have to put together the ordinance and then do the public notice. And so they got about 10 days after
There's a
October.
public notice piece in there.
There's that they're gonna have to, it would be really difficult for them to change course after about the 15th.
So the red line is that 10 days to get to the public notice.
I really meant it as October 9th. That's what I intended it
When we
as.
know when we have direction of what they're telling their staff on October 8th, we're gonna know. We're gonna know what to do.
So we don't need to
There's,
wait.
like
until
anything,
after
it's
the-
possible there to be a walk-on something from an elected, but
There's always a chance. We, and
So we
And
do this
just-
the first reading.
I'm having almost daily conversations with Lynn Peterson, you know, there's a lot of conversations going on about what specific language could look like. We're also in the last work session that they had, President Peterson asked staff to put together some candidate conditions that basically just affirm what Sherwood's committing to in the concept plan. So there's been a lot of conversations around that. As soon as that happened, a lot of the opposition groups out there have really ramped up their pressure on Metro councilors. Thousand Friends of Oregon, name the list. So we also had an internal meeting with our attorney, Carrie Richter, our land use attorney, to kind of talk about how do we, there's a couple of considerations. One is we want to be able to react fast if something happens that we don't like. Carrie also recommended that part of this resolution is reaffirming and clarifying what our concept plan says in terms of density. That's really important because let's say this gets approved, it strengthens our hand if in case there's like an appeal. And I almost guarantee you someone's gonna appeal this thing. So we want to make sure that the language and the conditions and everything that we've done,
assuming we
we have a
still.
really good
yeah.
defense for what we're doing. So that's
If it gets to the
part-
point that it's adopted, yes, it'll be appealed by somebody,
So, but that's
if we don't pull it before that.
that's right, but that's an important part of this resolution is clarifying some of these things, you know, strengthening.
But on the resolution, the only, because we went through the plan A, B, and C, right? We want to be a good partner, we want to create a master plan and do all this stuff and do housing and, but if we get to level C, to be devil's advocate here, if they say, well, we want 9.3% or 9.4% density, like, does that authorize you to pull the ripcord on that?
Technically it would, but I would get with Craig can reach, I mean, we can have some conversations, but we don't want to be in a situation where we can't get a special meeting scheduled.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
yeah, because
We just schedule one and have it,
well, we can do that. too,
that's not the
but
books.
But we also have the issue of a potential walk-on,
I think we need to have that protection in case, somebody, like, they get to the first reading, everything looks great, and then all of a sudden, you know, ahead of the second reading, we get wind that they've completely changed the conditions of approval. I want to be able to act fast if we need to.
Yeah.
and wouldn't that reset? They'd have to do another first reading on it?
So the scenario that is potentially realistic is they have their first reading, they have comments, they give direction to staff for a second reading. At the second reading, everything that they did in the first shows up in the proposal for the second reading, but then somebody walks on language to cut and paste, you know, make the sausage live, per se.
And approve an amended.
Yeah,
We've done that.
yeah, no, I know, okay.
And just to be clear, this isn't gonna be a surprise to Metro Council or staff. I've talked to them about it. I've told them why we're doing it. It's not an indication that we're not willing to cooperate. We're just making sure we have our ducks in a row. And I really emphasize the importance of getting to legal, making sure we have a solid legal case. Renee, do you have questions?
what is the current pulse of Metro counselors? You're having these conversations daily. Did they respond to our questions about the 9.2 units? Has that changed at all? Are they still saying it was an accident?
Remember, their staff did the report, not the electeds.
Yeah, staff did a report. Lynn directed staff to come back with conditions that hold Sherwood to what our concept plan says. That I'm sure that created an uproar behind the scenes with certain Metro counselors. I'm being a little cagey because I don't want to give what I'm hearing things, but I also want to let the process to move.
There's clearly a division among Metro Council.
There's
There will not be,
division.
there will not be a
It
unanimous.
will not be unanimous. There's 1 to 2 Metro councilors that I know will, it doesn't matter what we do, we'll never vote for this. And we have a group that is supportive. And we have some people on the fence. Yeah. Yeah.
There's tremendous statewide pressure on them to support our request.
What would it look like on October 9th, once we hear their recommendations to staff, direction to staff? What would it look like on October 9th if we said, okay, we're now gonna revise it to just be the industrial land? Like, how does Metro deal with that? Is it too late?
It would be, they would be under the gun they would really be squeezed to.
Could they even say, no, we're not gonna allow you to revise it?
They could.
They don't have to agree to our revision,
Okay.
Yeah, I think they.
so it's still,
They could just decline to do.
at the end of the day, we all have to agree, and if one side doesn't agree,
It's not happening.
then it's not happening.
Yeah, I think the modified proposal would,
I think that ship is kind of sailing personally.
it would be, it's very late in the process to modify the proposal, right?
And especially the amount of feedback we've gotten from our community, the number of sessions we've done to get to this full plan, to then throw all that out and say, okay, we're gonna just, like, I feel like that's.
Well, the
Yeah.
concept plan
The
was
concept
never
plan would
asking
never
for
go
all
away.
UGB in.
No, I'm just saying that revising that thing does not get us what we've all said, which was, we want to master plan this, we want to make it. Yeah, it's one of those things where the more I'm thinking about it, the more it's a solution that doesn't really make anybody happy.
It's, no, it doesn't. It's just, from a technical piece, the concept plan wouldn't change. We would just be bringing it in pieces.
And the bigger reality, if you want to, the true reality is it's gonna be a go, no go on the full thing. And we could pivot and modify the plan to just do industrial, when you can do just industrial in future years.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know how I feel about housing, and we've got to be a part of the solution and in solving that one part of, I mean, we're not gonna solve the whole housing crisis in Oregon, but there's a part of it that we can solve. Yeah, as Eric, you're saying, this is a 30-year plan, right? We need to have some land to be able to build some different kinds of, some variety of housing on. Get parks, get all that stuff. So I'm for the whole plan, but I understand it's a tight timeline.
Yeah, and
So.
given all the conversations that are going on about housing and SHS, everything in the region, my personal opinion is they're gonna be hard pressed to vote against this.
Because sense of things, but the reality that everybody at every level has to appreciate is you have our plan, but then there is all of this upside and let other people speculate just how much upside on density that there is in the plan. So that's why, for me, there's no upper end on the density.
We're at the upper end.
Because, so this is where we're planning, this is the starting block of the plan, and then as development occurs, they can add density within the additional laws and future additional laws that.
Right, it's not gonna be less.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just say, I know you guys preaching to the choir here as well, but I think for a lot of the stakeholders and others, it's important to just reiterate, this is a concept plan. And how we set up the zoning table in the concept plan was to show a range, and it was based on our current zoning. Just because we adopted that as a concept plan does not mean that we absolutely have to carry that forward into the comprehensive planning and master planning. You guys could do something else. You could stick to it, but you could also do something else as well. So it's absolutely not a maximum. The 9.2 units per acre is the likely outcome density at full build out. And that's what.
Without the additional state flexibility.
I think there's a little bit.
With some of them.
It could be, is a developer gonna be able to get to 100% without HB 2001 and SB 1537? Probably unlikely. So I think it accounts for a little bit lower and then a little bit higher with those house bills. So I can go over what the resolution tonight is, if you guys want to hear that in more detail.
To read it, or you want to go over it?
I've read it.
Okay. Great. We're all good with it, or?
I just wonder what kind of a message are we sending by coming out with that first?
I don't know, I wouldn't say we're
Options.
first, considering some of the stuff that they've put on the table publicly. I've been having a lot of conversations with Len and staff over there and some of the metro counselors to assure them, we're not doing this because, we're trying to negotiate poorly. There's legal reasons that we want to make sure this is all clear. And the timing is just going to be really close. And we know there's a lot of political pressure, so we're just making sure we have flexibility.
And the ones that aren't gonna like it, wouldn't like it if we did nothing.
Exactly.
So could we also schedule that meeting also,
We can
again?
still have a meeting, absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I wanna also telegraph, we wanna be partners and we wanna be collaborative on this, but there's also, we've heard from our community.
Every time we've got a work session.
I understand, but can we make sure that goes on the record?
So my commitment is we get close to that date, we'll get a work session scheduled. So we can
Okay.
talk about it. This is really for those, like Keith was talking about, these unexpected
Okay.
potential outcomes that we need to handle.
Great.
All right, work session adjourned. Get started in 5 minutes, and we got a bunch of kids here tonight.
For 90s.